Christopher Anthony Young spent 12 years on death row, his life ticking away in a Texas cell. But to understand how he ended up there, we must rewind to the streets of San Antonio, where a boy's dreams collided with a world of pain. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more gripping crime stories. Leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? What's running through your mind as this case unfolds? Your thoughts matter. Christopher Young was born on September 24, 1983, in Bexar County, Texas, in the heart of San Antonio. His early years unfolded in a working-class neighborhood on the city's east side, a place marked by economic struggle and simmering tension. Christopher grew up in a fractured family. His mother, barely 18 when she had him, raised him and his older sister as a single parent after splitting with his father, Willard Young. The instability of those early years left marks that wouldn't fade. His mother moved the family to Wisconsin for a time, chasing a new relationship, but it crumbled and they returned to Texas. Along the way, Christopher and his sister endured trauma. Court records later revealed that one of his mother's partners raped his sister and another abused Christopher himself. These scars, buried deep, shaped a boy already grappling with a world that felt unsteady. By age 8, tragedy struck again. In January 1992, Christopher's father, Willard, was gunned down in San Antonio, allegedly during a drug deal tied to his gang ties. Christopher was at a Martin Luther King Jr. Day parade with his father just an hour before the shooting. Losing his dad, a man he'd only begun to know, shattered something in him. "I really lost my way," his aunt Valerie Harris later recalled. With no father figure, Christopher turned to the streets for belonging. His uncle, a member of the Bloods gang, became his new role model. By age 8, Christopher was already running with the gang, drawn to its promise of family and power. What did a kid that young see in those dangerous streets? School offered little refuge. Described as a band nerd in high school, Christopher had a spark of potential, but his education suffered as chaos at home grew. He completed only up to the 9th grade, his focus pulled away by the lure of the streets. The east side of San Antonio, where he lived, was riddled with poverty and crime. "It shouldn't be impoverished like it was," Christopher later said, reflecting on how the environment shaped him. Early signs of trouble emerged: petty crimes, fights, and a growing reliance on drugs and alcohol to numb the pain. He was angry, reckless, and searching for something to fill the void left by his father's death. But what would that anger lead to? These early experiences, abuse, loss, and the pull of gang life, built a young man on a collision course with disaster. Christopher wasn't born a killer, but the world he grew up in handed him few chances to be anything else. On the morning of November 21, 2004, in San Antonio, Texas, Christopher Anthony Young's life took a dark turn that would end in tragedy. The day began with chaos fueled by alcohol, drugs, and a tangled personal dispute. Young, then 21, was reeling. He believed Hasmukh Patel, a 55-year-old store owner, was involved with the mother of one of his kids. This made him furious. Consumed by anger and clouded by nearly 24 beers and cocaine, Young set out to confront Patel. What unfolded would shatter lives forever. Around 7 a.m., he went to the apartment of a woman known as DS in court papers, thinking she knew something about the situation with Patel. Armed with a .380 caliber handgun, Young forced his way into her home, where she was with her 3 young kids. In a rage, he sexually assaulted her at gunpoint in front of her children. The trauma left the family scarred, their sense of safety destroyed. Forcing the woman into her own car, Young drove off, but she managed to escape, fleeing to safety. Young, now in her stolen vehicle, didn't stop. He drove just 1 block to the mini food mart and dry cleaners on San Antonio's east side, owned by Hasmukh Patel. This small store, a hub for the community, was about to become a scene of unthinkable violence. Inside the mini food mart, Young pulled out a .380 caliber handgun and demanded money. Patel, a hardworking father known for his kindness, tried to defuse the situation. Young later claimed he thought Patel was reaching for a weapon, though no evidence supported this. In a split second, Young fired. A single bullet struck Patel's hand, and ricocheted into his chest, piercing his heart. Patel collapsed, his life slipping away, as two customers in the parking lot watched in horror. The surveillance camera captured every moment, video and audio, freezing the tragedy in time. Patel's death left his family, especially his son Mitesh, grappling with a loss that would echo for years. Young fled in the stolen car, leaving behind a community in shock and a family broken. The senselessness of it all, a life taken over a fleeting dispute and a botched robbery, hung heavy. How could one morning spiral into such devastation? Before we dive deeper into the investigation that brought Young to justice, take a moment to subscribe. Stay with us as we uncover how the evidence came together to seal his fate. The crime was discovered almost immediately. The two customers in the parking lot, witnesses to the shooting, called police, their voices trembling as they described the chaos. San Antonio police arrived at the mini food mart to find Hasmukh Patel dead, his blood staining the floor of his own store. The scene was heartbreaking. A small business, a place of daily routines, now a crime scene. Investigators quickly secured the area, knowing every detail could lead them to the killer. The surveillance footage was the first breakthrough. The camera recorded Young's actions clearly, his demands, the gun, the fatal shot. The audio captured the panic, making the evidence undeniable. Ballistics confirmed the bullet that killed Patel came from a .380 caliber handgun, later traced to Young. But the trail didn't end there. Just 90 minutes after the shooting, police spotted the stolen car parked outside a crack house. Young was inside, having picked up a prostitute after the crime. His reckless path made him easy to find. Forensic evidence tightened the noose. DNA tests confirmed Young's involvement in the sexual assault earlier that morning, linking him to the stolen car and the events leading to Patel's murder. The two witnesses in the parking lot identified Young as the shooter, their accounts matching the surveillance footage. Young's own statements didn't help. He admitted to the shooting, but claimed it was an accident, saying he only meant to fire at Patel's hand. The evidence, however, told a different story, a deliberate act, caught on tape. Young's prior criminal history added weight to the case. Though he had no prior prison record, his ties to the Bloods gang since age 8 and a pattern of petty crimes and violence painted a picture of a troubled life. Court records noted his escalating behavior, fights, drug use, and now, a sexual assault and murder in a single morning. The prosecution argued this wasn't a one-off. It was the culmination of a path Young had been on for years. But could the evidence alone explain why this tragedy happened? The investigation was swift and airtight, leaving no doubt about Young's guilt. Yet the emotional toll lingered, for Patel's family, for the assaulted woman and her children, and for a community left to pick up the pieces. Christopher Anthony Young's defense hinged on a claim that the shooting of Hasmukh Patel on November 21, 2004, was an accident, not a deliberate act tied to robbery. "I didn't know I had killed an individual," Young later said in an interview. He also denied the sexual assault that happened earlier that morning, despite DNA evidence linking him to the crime. But could his story hold up against the mountain of evidence? The prosecution tore apart Young's alibi with ruthless precision. The store's surveillance footage was damning, showing Young demanding money at gunpoint, saying, "Give up the money, I'm not playing." The video captured him firing at Patel, who was behind the counter, with no sign of Patel reaching for a weapon. The trial, held in Bezier County's 187th District Court, began in January 2006 and gripped San Antonio. Prosecutors painted Young as a dangerous man whose actions that morning, assault, carjacking, and murder, showed a clear intent to rob and kill. The defense leaned on Young's troubled past, arguing his traumatic childhood and intoxication from alcohol and cocaine clouded his judgment. They called witnesses to testify about his rough upbringing, his father's murder, abuse, and gang involvement by age 8. But the prosecution countered with the surveillance tape's chilling clarity, replayed for the jury, showing Young's aggression. What would the jury decide about a man who claimed remorse but left a trail of devastation? On February 1, 2006, after deliberating for just under 2 hours, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of capital murder. The punishment phase followed, where the jury faced two key questions. Would Young be a future danger? And were there mitigating factors to spare him from death? The defense highlighted his youth, 21 at the time of the crime, and traumatic past. But the prosecution emphasized the brutality of the murder and assault. After less than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury answered yes to future dangerousness and no to mitigation, sentencing Young to death on February 1, 2006. The courtroom fell silent as the sentence was read, a family's loss, and a young man's fate sealed. Young's fight to avoid execution began with a direct appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, filed after his 2006 conviction. His lawyers raised 15 points of error, including a critical claim that the trial court failed to properly instruct the jury on the mitigation special issue. They argued the jury wasn't told they didn't need to agree on specific mitigating evidence, like Young's childhood trauma or intoxication, to vote for a life sentence. Judge Price's dissenting opinion on April 22, 2009, called this a plain error causing egregious harm, as it could have led jurors to mistakenly believe they needed unanimous agreement on mitigating factors. But the majority disagreed, affirming Young's conviction and death sentence on April 22, 2009, with a rehearing denied on June 10, 2009. Young's team didn't stop there. In 2013, a habeas corpus petition to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals claimed ineffective assistance of counsel and other procedural errors, but it was denied. Federal appeals followed, including a 2016 challenge to the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, again arguing flawed jury instructions. The court rejected this, finding no evidence the jury was misled enough to warrant overturning the sentence. Young's lawyers also raised concerns about his mental health, citing his traumatic childhood as factors that impaired his decision-making. However, no formal diagnosis of intellectual disability or severe mental illness was presented, as court records focused more on his behavior than clinical evaluations. In a final desperate push, Young's attorney David Dow filed a civil rights lawsuit on July 13, 2018, against the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. The board had unanimously rejected Young's clemency petition, despite support from Patel, the victim's son, who believed Young had changed. Dow argued racial bias, pointing to the board's decision to grant clemency to Thomas Whitaker, a white inmate, earlier that year. Both men had shown remorse and had victim family support, yet only Whitaker's sentence was commuted. Race appears to be the driving force, Dow wrote. On July 17, 2018, U.S. District Judge Keith Ellison denied the stay, expressing frustration that the tight timeline made it well-nigh impossible to prove racial bias, though he noted the case exposed flaws in Texas's clemency process. Christopher Anthony Young spent 12 years on Texas's death row at the Polunsky Unit in Livingston, a stark, isolated world of concrete cells and strict routines. Locked up for the 2004 murder of Hasmukh Patel and the sexual assault that same morning. Young, then 21, entered the system as a man shaped by trauma and gang life. But what would a decade-plus behind bars do to him? Life on death row was grueling. Housed in a 6-by-10-foot cell for 23 hours a day, Young faced the monotony of solitary confinement. He was allowed 1 hour of recreation, often in a caged area, and had limited contact with others. Yet Young didn't stay idle. He began writing letters, mentoring at-risk youth through programs like the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's Pen Pal system. He warned kids about the dangers of gangs, drawing from his own past as a Bloods member since age 8. "I've seen brothers die, friends die," he wrote, urging them to choose a different path. His aunt, Valerie Harris, said he found purpose in these letters, a way to atone for his crimes. Young also turned to faith. Raised Baptist, he explored Islam and later embraced Christianity, often meeting with spiritual advisors. He read voraciously, from self-help books to religious texts, and expressed remorse in interviews, saying, "I wish I could take it back." But his transformation wasn't without struggle. He clashed with guards early on, earning disciplinary reports for minor infractions. Over time, though, he became a mediator, calming tensions among inmates. In 2016, He prevented a riot on death row, earning praise from prison staff. Was this a sign of genuine change, or a man desperate to rewrite his story? Despite his efforts, the weight of his sentence loomed. Young maintained close ties with his family, especially his two daughters, whom he wrote to often. He spoke of wanting to be a father they could be proud of, even from behind bars. As his execution date neared, he grew reflective, telling supporters he accepted his fate, but hoped his story would save others. The question lingered, could a man who'd taken a life rebuild his own in the shadow of death? On July 17, 2018, Christopher Young faced his execution at the Huntsville Unit's death chamber, known as the Walls Unit. The day was heavy with tension. At 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, Young was led into the small, green-tiled room, strapped to a gurney, with IV lines prepared for the lethal injection. Witnesses, including Patel, the son of the man Young killed, watched from behind glass. Mitish, in a rare act of forgiveness, had campaigned for Young's clemency, moved by his remorse and prison transformation. What would Young say in his final moments? Young's spiritual advisor, a prison chaplain, stood nearby, offering quiet support. Young, now 34, had spent the day with family, eating a last meal of pizza, nachos, and ice cream. He appeared calm, but resolute, his eyes scanning the room. At 6:13 p.m., given the chance to speak, Young delivered his final statement with clarity. I want to make sure the Patel family knows I love them like they love me. Make sure the kids in the world know I'm being executed and don't think it's cool to be a gangster. His words carried weight, aimed at both healing and warning. He thanked his supporters, were saying, I taste the drug now, as the pentobarbital began to flow. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the prison's machinery. Mitish Patel, visibly emotional, later said he felt Young's remorse was genuine, a rare bridge between victim and condemned. Young's mother and aunt, present as witnesses, wept quietly. At 6:38 p.m., CDT, 25 minutes after the injection began, Young was pronounced dead. His eyes closed slowly. His breathing stopped, and the room felt heavier. Young's final words echoed beyond the chamber, a plea for redemption and a cautionary tale. But would his message reach the kids he hoped to save, or fade with his last breath? Christopher Anthony Young's life ended on July 17, 2018, after a journey marked by pain, crime, and a late search for redemption. From the shattered streets of San Antonio to the cold finality of the Huntsville death chamber, his story leaves us grappling with hard truths about trauma, choices, and consequences. The Patel family lost a beloved father, a woman and her children endured unspeakable trauma, and Young's own daughters grew up without him. Yet Mitish Patel's forgiveness and Young's prison transformation add layers to a story that's more than a crime. It's a mirror to society's failures and possibilities. Was justice served by Young's execution, or does his case reveal deeper questions about punishment, race, and second chances?